Hello dear learners, welcome to the online class. I think you all are keeping well by the grace of Almighty Allah. I am also fine. This is Hasina Islam, lecturer, Department of English, Tongi Government College, Gazipur. This lecture is for the students of Honours second year. This is the second lecture from John Keats' Grecian Ode to the Grecian Urn. And I think you all have enjoyed the first lecture. In the previous lecture, I have given you the poem and some important information regarding this poem. Today, we are going to start the summary and analysis of this poem, Ode on a Grecian Urn by John Keats. So, let's start. First of all, I am going to give you the summary. Keats' imagined urn is addressed as if he were contemplating a real urn. Here, the urn is personified. Okay, it is treated as a person. It has survived intact from antiquity. It is a Sylvan historian telling us a story. Okay, so the urn is addressed as a Sylvan historian who is telling the story. Okay, so the picture depicted on this urn, it tells the story of a story from the historical background. So which the poet suggests by a series of questions. That is, the first stanza starts with some questions. Who are these gods or men carved or painted on the urn? So he is asking the questions here. Who are these reluctant maidens? What is this mad pursuit? Why the struggle to escape? What is the explanation for the presence of musical instruments? Why this mad ecstasy? So these are the questions given at the very opening stanza. Imagined melodies are lovelier than those heard by human ears. Therefore, the poet urges the musician pictured on the urn to play on. So, on the urn, we will find the picture of some musician, those who are playing some music. But the poet feels that these musics are very lovely. That is, lovelier than the heard music by human. Okay, created by human being. His song can never end, nor the trees ever shed their leaves. That is, all these things will be very lively because art has its own power to make all these things immortal. So the lover on the urn can never win a kiss from his beloved, but his beloved can never lose her beauty. That is, his beloved will be the same, that is, as young as she is looking now. Happy are the trees on the urn, for they can never lose their leaves. The trees which are depicted on this urn, they will not shed their leaves. Happy is the musician forever playing songs, forever new. The musician who are playing songs, those will be continued forever. The lovers on the urn enjoy a love forever warm, forever painting and forever young, far better than actual love, which eventually brings frustration and dissatisfaction. So once again, I am going to give you the information, that is, and at a very opening stanza, Keats starts with some questions like, who are the people coming to perform a sacrifice? To what altar does the priest lead a Garlic Haifa. So this type of questions are given in the very opening stanza. Fair urn, Keats says, adorned with figures of men and maidens. That is, on this urn there are figures of men and maidens, trees and grass. You bring our speculations to a point at which thought leads nowhere, like meditation on eternity. After our generation is gone, you will still be here. That is, generation after generation, the urn will be here and this picture will be very lively. Okay? So, a friend to man, telling him that beauty is truth and truth is beauty. This is a very famous line from this poem. That is, beauty is truth and truth is beauty. Here we find Keats' love for Greek culture, which is entitled as Hellenism. And here Keats expresses that beauty is truth and truth is beauty. That is all he knows on earth and all he needs to know. So now we are going to start the analysis of this poem. Keats has created a Greek urn in his mind and has decorated it with three scenes. Okay, so the first is full of frenzied action, and the actors are men or gods and maidens. Other figures, or possibly the male figures, are playing musical instruments. The maidens are probably the nymphs of classical mythology. That is, he has taken these characters from classical mythology. The men or gods are smitten with love and are pursuing them. Keats, who loved classical mythology, we find here Keats' love of Greek culture and mythology, which is known as Hellenism. Okay. The second scene is developed in stanzas 2 and 3. Under the trees, a lover is surrounding his beloved. In stanza 1, Keats confined himself to suggesting a scene by questions. The second scene is not presented by means of questions but by means of description. So the opening stanza starts with some questions, but the second stanza gives the description. Okay. So we see a youth in a grove playing a musical instrument and hoping it seems for a kiss from his beloved. The scene elicits some thoughts on the function of art from Keats. Art gives a kind of permanence to reality. Here, Keats develops the idea that is, art itself is permanent. Our real life is full of anxieties, full of sorrows, and art itself is permanent. Okay, so the youth, the maiden, and the musical instruments are, as it were, caught and held permanently by being pictured on the urn. That is, all the picture depicted on this urn, they will be alive forever. Okay, and so Keats can take pleasure in the thought that the music will play on forever, and although the lover can never receive the desired kiss, the maiden can never grow older nor lose any her beauty. The love that they enjoy is superior to human love, which leaves behind. So here Keats expresses these ideas, and Keats seems to be telling us is one of the pleasurable contributions of art to men. That is, art gives us the pleasure or the pleasures offered by art itself. The third scene of Keats' urn is a group of people on their way to perform a sacrifice to some god. So it is a sacrificial scene where a group of people are going to perform a sacrifice. Okay, the sacrificial victim, lowing heifer, is held by a priest. Instead of limiting himself to the sacrificial procession as another scene on his urn. Keats goes on to mention the town epithet on its inhabitants by the procession. The town is desolate and will forever be silent. The town depicted here will forever be silent. Okay. The final stanza contains the beauty-truth question, the most controversial line in all the criticism of Keats' poetry. So he here says, beauty is truth, truth beauty. Okay. So this is a controversial line. No critic's interpretation on the line satisfies any other critic, however, and no doubt they will continue to wrestle with the question as long as the poem is read. In the stanza, Keats also makes two main comments on his urn. The urn teases him out of thought, as does eternity. That is, the problem of the effect of work of art on time and life. Actually, Keats wanted to escape from the reality. He wanted to take shelter of art, okay, and imagination. Okay. The second thought is the truth beauty question through the poet's imagination. He thinks that beauty itself is very lively. It contains it is a continuous process and it never dies. Beauty and truth, they are interrelated. Okay. Although Keats was not a particularly religious man, his meditation on the problem of happiness and its brief duration in the course of writing Ode on a Grecian Urn brought him a glimpse of heaven. That is, though he was not a believer of heaven, here he gives the thought of heaven, okay, a state of existence which his lectures show he did think about. In his lecture on November 22, 1870, he expressed about his thought of heaven. So here is the analysis and summary of this poem. I think it will be helpful for you. Of course, you have to prepare the questions from here, and I think you will take a very good preparation from this poem. This is a very important topic for you. Okay. Thank you. Have a nice day.